This lesson is about the importance of listening, particularly as a senior leader. Oftentimes, senior leaders develop a certain deafness, in part because you're in charge, you run the show, but also because of the fact that the people below you manage you powerfully. And they filter, sometimes consciously and sometimes unconsciously, what comes to you and to your desk. And so it's absolutely critical that you learn the skills of what I would call deep listening, listening beyond what is just spoken. The story begins many, many hundreds of years ago in China. And it's the story of an emperor who wanted his son to be a wise leader. And so he sent his son, a little prince, off to study under a great master. And the master had a simple task, but a profoundly difficult task for this little prince. He said, what I want you to do is go into the jungle for 1 full year. And all I want you to do during that year is listen as best you can to what is surrounding you in the jungle. So the little prince wandered off into the jungle, not terribly excited about this assignment. It was a developmental assignment, but as you might imagine, for a young teenager, this was going to be a bit of a hardship sitting in the jungle. So he did his duty. He sat around. He listened as best he could. After the year, he came back to the master. And the master said, what have you learned in this year? And the little prince put on a big smile, proud of what he had heard. And he said, I've heard lightning. I've heard rain falling. I've heard wind blowing. It's been a very interesting year. I've heard many things. And as he spoke of all the things he heard, he looked at the master's face, and the master's face increasingly turned disappointed. And at the end of his sharing to the master said, you really haven't learned much at all, young man. I want you to go back now, and this time spend the year listening more deeply. Well, the little prince was quite surprised. He thought he had heard everything he was supposed to hear, and he headed back for another year. He figured it was going to be a painful, long year. But this time he really tried to listen. But he wasn't certain, but he paid more attention in the year. When he came back, he said, Master, I'm not sure. I mean, I heard all the other things that I heard the first year, but this time I also heard some other things. Perhaps more deeply, I heard the roots pushing through the soil. I actually heard dew forming on leaves in the morning. I felt and heard the earth warming under the morning sun. So I heard things which I didn't hear the first time. I don't know whether those are the right things, but that's what I heard. The master's face broke into a warm smile, and he said, now you have heard. Now you've truly listened. And the lesson for you, little prince, is that as a leader, you must hear what is unspoken. Because people will speak, but it will not be what you need to hear. It is what you do not at first hear. That's what you must know, because that will inform your actions. To illustrate the story of the little prince in a modern-day sense, let me use the example of Carlos Ghosn, the head of Nissan and now CEO of Renault. Carlos Ghosn, if you talk to executives who know Carlos well, one of the attributes they will describe to you, which they themselves find both wonderful and surprising from such a successful CEO, is that at a dinner, he will sit down and ask you question after question after question. And he'll spend far more time listening to you than he will sharing his point of view. And in many ways, you see the embodiment then of the leader who actually finds listening as the more useful vehicle for learning than their own accomplishments and what they might share there. So the lesson learned is that you must listen very deeply. You have to hear what is not spoken. And as you get to be more and more senior as a leader, that becomes more and more of a dilemma for you, because the organization will filter more and more of what you hear and package it very nicely. And you have to override that set of circuits in order to be effective. Key learning points for you are, 1, ask more questions than you give answers. Find multiple sources of information and multiple points of view for every major issue you're pondering, debating, considering. Go out into the field, find ways to talk to frontline people, find ways to talk to customers, invite them to share with you where they're concerned, where their discontents are, where they feel the product, the service can be improved. Customers are probably the best place because they're more likely to tell you very candidly. But it's amazing how often a good relationship with frontline individuals will bring you the news you need. As well, surround yourself with a few truth tellers. These are courageous people. They're often mavericks who will tell you a contrary point of view from the rest of the group. Make certain you have a few of them in your cabinet, a few of them on your team. You need them. You need a few Cassandras. As well, remind people to bring you the bad news early and personally, and then reward them for that versus penalize them for that.